Before we start, I have to admit that this video is a little bit selfish. While I understand that it's not everyone's cup of tea, Interstellar is my favourite film of all time. Besides, it was the winning option in a poll I did on my channel. What a great excuse to make a video about it. There is so much I could talk about, such as its scientific accuracy, gorgeous cinematography, and mind-boggling ending that still confuses first-time viewers to this day. Most of this has been covered by other channels, however, so let's do something a little more specific. At its core, Interstellar is a story about love, and its power to still persist even when separated by space and time. Yes, there are themes tackling humanity's willingness to survive. However, the paternal bond between Cooper and Murph is what lies at the heart of this story. Tell me, did you cry during this scene? How about this one? Even if you didn't, I'm sure it resonated with you in some way. It tends to be quite rare for sci-fi films to elicit such a visceral response, especially one that's in a $165 million blockbuster. However, it doesn't feel out of place when you watch it. In fact, I want to convince you that it's the high concept elements which allow for such emotional storytelling in the first place. In most big budget sci-fi films, directors tend to focus on capturing a sense of awe and wonder not possible in other genres. This isn't to say that emotion isn't possible. In fact, I'd argue that it's actually a necessity for good sci-fi and movies as a whole. Unfortunately, the genre tends to get a bad rap sometimes for being perceived as cold and bleak. This is due to the popularity of dystopian stories, exploring possible futures that shine a lens on the worst aspects of humanity. I want to put this notion to rest, so let's do it using Interstellar as an example. How can sci-fi elicit such powerful emotions? And why is this futuristic setting a necessity in telling Cooper and Murph's story? To understand why the genre can be powerful, we first need to understand its history. The origins of sci-fi as we know it can be traced back to literature in the 19th century. Authors like Mary Shelley and H.G. Wells popularized many concepts which are still used to this day. Obviously, this is a channel focused on cinema, so I won't go into detail on these. However, I bring this up because it's impossible to ignore their influence on filmmaking. In fact, much of H.G. Wells' work was adapted into film during the golden age of cinema. Unethical science, extraterrestrial aliens, and time travel are all staples now, but were new and exciting at the time. The thing is, a lot of these early films missed the point. There's exceptions to every rule, of course. However, sci-fi was not taken very seriously. A lot were B-movies that served as a standard action flicks or demonstrations of cool special effects. In fact, we still get a bunch of these now. I somehow doubt anyone was watching Moonfall expecting a compelling story about humanity. Before you run to the comments to call me a film snob, just know that I sometimes love a good action flick. Not every movie needs to be a think piece. Some can be purely entertainment, and that's okay. That being said, these films do not tend to stand the test of time due to their lackluster story. They'll be fun for 2 hours to watch some cool visuals, but will not connect on an emotional level. This is why sci-fi in the filmmaking world tends to be extremely watered down when compared to the literature that inspires it. As one example, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is a highly thought-provoking novel. It's not an accident that it was also titled The Modern Prometheus. Much of the book is a character study that grapples with the ethical qualms of Victor creating life and his complicated relationship with the monster. The power of sci-fi in literature is the imagination. Shelley's description of the monster is purposely vague, meaning we have to picture how hideous this creature could be for humanity to treat it with disgust. Film is a visual medium, however. Unlike novels, which have the ability to describe a character's thoughts in depth, this can only be conveyed in a movie through dialogue, performance, and visual storytelling. It's no wonder that many sci-fi films are therefore geared towards special effects and pretty visuals. In fact, many Frankenstein adaptations are just generic horror flicks without the ethical conundrums of the original novel it's based on. Again, not a bad thing on its own. However, doing this comes at the cost of having no complex themes or emotional core. Thanks in large part to Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, sci-fi movies began to be taken a lot more seriously from the 60s onwards. Yes, we still get generic blockbusters, but the philosophical and emotional aspect present in literature was finally carried over into mainstream film. Think movies like Blade Runner, Minority Report, and Arrival. All these examples are so memorable due to their in-depth exploration of complicated ideas. What does it mean to be human? Can we still influence the future if it's already been predetermined? These are questions that allow for deep discussions and emotional storytelling. Having established this, let's ask something else. Why even bother using sci-fi? After all, many simply use it as an aesthetic choice. The thing is, time travel, cloning, and space exploration isn't always just there for show. I believe it's because such high concept elements allow for screenwriters to give a physical representation to an otherwise abstract theme or emotion. This is what makes Cooper and Murph's relationship so powerful, which I'll go into depth in the second half of this video. Let's instead turn to a more recent example to clarify what I'm talking about. A show I want to cover in a future video, Severance. Don't worry, I won't spoil anything past what's already established in the first episode for those who haven't watched it yet. In the pilot, we learn that Mark has been grieving over the death of his wife Gemma. This is the driving factor behind his decision to undergo the severance procedure at Lumen, where his work and life memories are separated from one another. I'm sure plenty of people watching have experienced grief before, and sometimes wish they could just bury their memories in pain. The thing is, this feeling is quite difficult to capture in a visual medium such as film. By instead creating a tangible sci-fi concept like Severance, it gives the writers a way of directly showing how extreme and overbearing these emotions are. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is an example of a movie that does a similar thing. This is what I mean when I say that sci-fi has the ability to turn the abstract into reality. Coming up with cool concepts is one thing, but what's the point in having them unless they can elevate the story? Dystopian futures tend to be popular because they can offer commentary on humanity's flaws. Severance is fictional, but I bet there are plenty of people out there who would get the procedure to avoid doing rigorous work for 8 hours a day, even if that means creating a new version of you suffering for their entire life. This power isn't just limited to themes, but can be used to heighten emotions too. I've been talking about other works too much, so let's finally tackle Interstellar to see how the Nolan brothers made us cry so much. I'd also love to hear what your favourite sci-fi films are, so let me know down in the comments below. Please make sure you leave me a like while you're there too. Like I mentioned earlier, Cooper and Murph's bond is the emotional core of the story. However, this might not be obvious to everyone on a first watch. The two are separated for a majority of the film's runtime, so how can their love possibly persist? If you're asking that question, congratulations! That's the point. Love has the power to transcend time and space, which should sound familiar because Dr. Brand says it in this scene.
I'm drawn across the universe to someone I haven't seen in a decade who I know is probably dead.
For some reason, I've seen a lot of comments online stating that this dialogue feels out of place. Those looking at Interstellar from a scientifically accurate blockbuster point of view think it's a cringy argument. Others believe that the message is a little too obviously stated without much subtext. While I can agree a little with the second point, I still think it's a necessary scene due to how easy it is to get lost during the mind-bending climax. Most people in a first watch tend to get distracted by the Tesseract. However, this high conceptual element exists to reinforce the notion of love's power to cross the universe. I'll go one step further and claim that it wouldn't be possible to do this as well in any other genre of film. Let's imagine for a moment that Interstellar wasn't a sci-fi, but a historical drama. Instead of Earth suffering a blight, an island of residents experiences famine. Cooper is therefore sent on a voyage across the seas to find a new home. At first, it seems like this story is the exact same with a new setting. But what happens to Murph? How could love persisting be shown in any physical way? The emotions might be there, but getting rid of Gargantua makes them much less impactful. At the end of the day, it's the black hole at the center of this story that allows for such teary moments. So let's explore these. Our first real cry happens almost 40 minutes into the film, in this scene when Cooper says goodbye. On the surface, it doesn't actually seem that special on a first watch. At the end of the day, plenty of other movies grapple with the sorrow we feel when leaving a loved one behind. Hindsight is instead what makes this so devastating. Knowing that Cooper is Murph's ghost, and is quite literally telling himself to stay behind, it's impossible to avoid crying during these scenes. We all know that feeling of regret, wishing we could turn back time and tell ourselves to do something differently. This can't be done in the real world, of course, but sci-fi suddenly opens up that possibility. Even though Cooper is still given the opportunity, however, his past self still refuses to listen. Yes, he has to leave in order to end up in the Tesseract in the first place. Our brain knows that logically. You could even argue that such a plot device removes free will entirely, which is a criticism of most time travel stories. However, Cooper's heart still wants to believe that maybe, just maybe, there's a possibility that he will stay. As a side note, let me know if you want me to cover the time travel plot device in a future video, as it's an interesting topic with lots to discuss. The marriage of high concept with emotion is what makes the movie so powerful. Just really quick, I want to discuss a common sentiment I see online. For some reason, many seem to think that the themes of love are too ham-fisted and out of place in Interstellar. I disagree with this entirely. I think this opinion stems a lot from the marketing of the film, which sought to promote scientific accuracy and visual spectacle as the biggest reasons to see it in cinemas. While both of these are prevalent, there's absolutely zero reason why drama cannot coexist with the two. In fact, a movie with no tension or stakes is quite boring. Without the paternal relationship at the film's core, Interstellar would become another generic blockbuster that's only good for pretty wallpapers on your phone. We still talk about this film a decade after its release because of our emotional attachment to what's on screen.
Maybe it's some artifact of a higher dimension that we can't consciously perceive.
But love isn't some higher dimensional force. That's scientifically inaccurate. Okay, so what? Icy clouds aren't real either. I think people were taking this line a little too much at face value, because Nolan is not trying to state that love is a literal unit of measurement. At the end of the day, Brand's feelings for Edmund are clouding her judgment when she says this. The implication is that love is a powerful emotion that draws us to others even when far apart. This is why it's compared to the force of gravity, which attracts two objects together over a large distance. At the end of the day, the Tesseract itself is just infinite copies of Murph's bedroom over time, visualized in 3D space. The area isn't anything special on its own. However, Cooper's love for Murph is what allows him to communicate inside it, by applying gravitational anomalies to things he knows she will understand. Now, you can disagree with me all you want and believe the melodrama is tacky, but I'm firm on the belief that the general relativistic time dilation would be pointless without this.
And today I'm the age you were when you left.
Yes, that's right, it's finally time to talk about one of the most devastating scenes in modern cinema. When we watch a movie, certain moments tend to hit hardest when we can directly relate to the characters on screen. The thing is, not everyone has a good relationship with their father, assuming they exist in your life at all. Similarly, not everyone has a daughter or children at all. Despite this, however, it's almost impossible to avoid tearing up like Cooper, even for those who lack such a strong bond with their family. This is because the scene taps into an experience that's a little more universal. Everyone knows the feeling of time slipping away from us. One day you wake up and realize it's already 2025, panicking over the years you supposedly lost. I'm personally at a stage in my life right now where I feel that exact way. What Interstellar does is take this specific emotion and make it a reality. It's one thing to wonder where the years have gone by, however, it's another for it to literally happen. That's why this scene hits so close to home. Nolan could have easily taken the time dilation concept and only used it as an interesting way to raise the stakes. However, not only does he suddenly shorten the time the Endurance team have to save humanity, at least from their perspective, but also shortens the time Cooper has to watch his children grow. Christopher Nolan is quite notorious for keeping his life outside of directing private. That being said, we can infer from interviews that the movie draws from deeply personal experiences. The working title of the film was Flora's Letter, named after his daughter. The original script also had Murph as a boy, but this was later changed as, according to Nolan, the whole movie is about what it means to be a dad. No wonder Interstellar is his most heartfelt work, as that personal touch shines through more than in any of his other films. I can imagine this scene hits a little too close to home for any fathers out there watching this video. In an age where many parents have to work multiple jobs to survive, it's quite common for them to have very little time to spend with their children. Suddenly, you wake up one day and realize that the baby you once held in your arms is now a full-grown adult. Hence, it's no wonder that watching this happen on screen makes us such an emotional wreck. No one wants to outlive their own children too, but that's exactly what happens at the end of the film. It's not entirely bleak though, as Cooper finally reunites with an elderly Murph, keeping his promise he made at the start of the film and helping save humanity. While a traditional drama can still be compelling, it's often quite difficult to represent emotions and themes in a visual medium like film. Interstellar is such a good case study on how conceptual sci-fi elements can open up new storytelling possibilities and allow for physical representations of abstract ideas. Go give it a rewatch, you'll be surprised just how human it is. Let me know if you want to see another video on this movie, as I could potentially talk about 2001's influences on it. Trust me when I say there's a lot more similarities than just spaceship design. Anyways, thanks for watching the entire video. Make sure you subscribe for more, and leave me a like since you've made it to the end.